Second player press start.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Second Player Press Start. My name is James and I'm joined by my friend
Darren.
And today we have a little blast from the past. I guess the saying goes, you don't know... No, I forgot the saying.
I can't help you.
You don't know where you're at until you know where you've came from, I guess.
Gotcha.
Something along those lines. So we decided to kind of go back to a simpler time, 2001 to be exact. And we played a launch title for the original Xbox One.
So to provide some context, you and I graduated from high school in 2000.
Yeah, so this was a year after we graduated. I think we did play a lot of Xbox back then.
We did.
I remember going to your house and playing Halo for hours on end.
Yeah.
That was kind of the go-to game.
Yeah, Xbox releasing with 4-player co-op games was just awesome and crazy and super awesome.
But we did not play Halo. We played another launch title called Fuzion Frenzy.
Fuzion Frenzy!
Yep. So it was a launch title. It's a 4-player party game. Darren and I played, obviously, just the two of us. And we were joined by 2 AI opponents. And it's essentially, just a mini-game collection of small little bite-sized games that you compete kind of round by round to earn points. You kind of select how many stages you want to endure to begin with. We selected 4. And that gave us about 30 minutes of playtime.
Sure.
And
we tinkered with a few mini games at the end where you could just pick one mini game and try it out, because there was so many, though there was a lot of samey ones.
Yeah, it was pretty apparent after kind of playing for about 10 minutes. There was kind of a few core game kind of concepts that they would then recycle into different versions or different kind of flavors of the same thing. And yeah, there's, like Darren just mentioned, there's another mode that we tried out at the end that basically gives you access to all of the mini games, and you can kind of pick which ones you enjoy playing and play those at will.
Right.
This game definitely shows its age in terms of its attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's a good word.
The music, the hip-hop you don't stop repeating every 10 seconds. They had this kind of background track that was just kind of a 10-second loop just over and over again. But even just the character designs and the little voice quips were straight out of that era.
Right. It felt more 90s, but I mean, early 2000s felt 90s, so that makes sense.
Yeah, lots of characters with kind of extreme spiky hair and...
kind of a rave style mixed with maybe a bit of like early 90s hip-hop style.
Yeah, it was kind of techno meets hip-hop.
Yeah.
It's a very silly game, but I think for what it is, like it was kind of neat to go back and look at an original Xbox game.
Sure.
I got to give kudos to Microsoft for bringing these titles kind of back from then to now. The fact that you can play, that old of a game on current hardware is pretty neat. And this game's also available on the Xbox Game Pass service for free, so I wouldn't really recommend spending money on it unless you have like a warm heart or a warm spot in your heart.
Nostalgia for it.
Yeah, if you played this back in the day and you want to play this again. But this was the first time that I've played this.
Yeah, same.
And even though it was the first time, it kind of brought me back to that time period.
That era, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like... So this is the kind of game that it's a casual party game, right? As much as you can get in that space on a console platform. And this is kind of, this is Mario Party style, right? This is what this kind of casual party game started as, was let's just do all these fun mini games, emphasis on fun. Or maybe that's in like quotes or something, right? Fun mini games.
The 2001 version of fun.
Yeah, and then the thing is that the idea behind it of co-op multiplayer, where there's 4 people competing at once, still works. Like, there's still games that are coming out today, but I think they're spending more time on the game itself than simply saying, okay, because it's a mini game, it doesn't matter what you're doing or how annoying it is or whatever. You're only going to do a little bit of it, so why not just mix it up and you can do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I feel like, especially when you mentioned the idea of recycling some of these core mechanics or core mechanisms, it felt really lackluster. Like, to say that, there's 100 mini games in this or whatever the total number is, but really, there's like maybe 30, right? There's like 30% of that total because most of the mechanics are recycled. I just feel like today, if somebody's going to do a game like this, it'd be way better to find some mini games that are really fun and find the fun in all those mini games, and then just reduce your set to just the really good ones, the ones that work well, the ones that play test well. I found so many of these ones here, which were just like activities of frustration. And that's pretty much all they were there was some where you were player elimination. So those ones meant that if I was really bad at it, and I was really bad at this, I was like 4th place almost every time.
Until you got paired up with, was it Zach?
Zach, yeah, because Zach, the CPU character, was the master of every game. And he totally deserved the win. But before I get into the AI part of it, I feel like the player elimination stuff, I would either stop playing immediately because I was that bad, or I would play and play and play and know that there was no way I was going to win it. And in some cases, I couldn't even king make. Like, there was some games where I would have loved to just hand it to Zach, to just punch that Zach character in the face and at least let James win a match. But I couldn't do that. Even because of my poor skills, I wasn't even able to stop the AI player from getting enough of a lead that somebody else could take that place.
Right. Yeah, some of the games were definitely, like, pretty frantic and pretty crazy, and it was kind of hard to keep track of your tiny little character on the screen. And there's a lot going on, which I guess has its strengths because you kind of don't really take it too seriously. It kind of adds to the dopey funness of it.
Yeah, I can agree to an extent, but I remember we've played some casual games so far, and I'm thinking of Nidhogg, and it was direct competitive, and it did have a casual element to it, but at the same time, for the most part, we were shouting and like we were excited, and it was funny when we stomped each other and then we pushed past them. There was elements of that game that you could tell from watching us, not the screen, that we were enjoying ourselves and we were getting something out of it that we wouldn't get from a different game. And there was maybe, how many games would you say we went through in the 4 sets? It was like 4x4, so 16 games maybe?
Yeah, about that.
Maybe 5x4, so 20. So out of all those games, I would say there was maybe 2, maybe 3 if I had to stretch, where I was like, oh man, I can't believe that happened or whatever, where I was actually having fun. And that's a really small percentage for a casual game like that. For a game that's built for all your friends to join up and have a good time, the fact that the small percentage of time that I actually enjoyed myself was so low that there was very little here for me.
So you're saying you didn't enjoy the Fusion Frenzy?
I'm saying there were games that I did like, and if they were able to capitalize on those games and improve on those games, then there's more here for me in this style. Now, to be fair, I don't play a lot of games that are simply just tactical, more casual end of the spectrum games, because that doesn't satisfy me when it comes to games in general. But at the same time, even a fighting game that we've played together, and I could throw Nidhogg in that pile, but you and I are generally skill matched, in some capacity. We're relatively skilled, so that the two of us can play a fighting game, and you can win some and then I can win some, and it can go back and forth. It's not like me playing against a pro Street Fighter player and losing every time. And same for you, right? So that means that the engagement is always high, the tension is always high, because the competition is always there. In this game, it felt like it didn't matter what I did, and I'm saying this for the majority of the mini games. It didn't matter what I did, because I was going to lose, or I knew I was going to lose before we even got halfway done the game, or it was a player elimination game where I lost in the first 5 seconds. Right. There was nothing I could do about that. It wasn't a game that I enjoyed enough that I would want to get better at either, because it didn't feel like in a lot of the games that I could improve. The kind of feedback that the game gave you for playing wasn't enough to learn from. We just got stomped by the AI player. Which brings me to the AI issue. But to say that we played on medium and to get stomped by the AI player almost hands down every single game, just that didn't make any sense to me.
And it was interesting that it was always the one
AI character.
Yeah,
too,
there was points where we predicted, like, oh yeah, Zach's gonna win this one again.
Right.
And sure enough, he did.
Yeah. And you could say something for the coding of the AI. The fact that they were winning all the time means that, they've coded the AI to be able to do what the players are supposed to do in some capacity. But it also felt like there was a few moments, and, I'm not interested in watching the replay to find out for sure, but there was a few moments where it felt like even the AI was cheating, where it had way more points than it should have based on what I was seeing on the screen. Or we played like a Snakes/Tron style game where you have to, if you cross another player's tail, then you are eliminated. And it looked like James was eliminated for crossing his own tail, but it didn't happen to the AI player when it looked like that's what happened to them on the screen. So moments like that too, where if your AI is going to cheat and you're still at medium level, like what does hard level even look like? And is it even worth throwing an AI opponent in at that point? So those were all these really frustrating moments that made what was supposed to be a fun, chaotic, random, casual game that's just about fun, just in so many ways detracted from that fun for me.
Do you think if we had 4 players, you would change your opinion?
So I think that having 4 players would remove the AI element. Yeah. That was frustrating. And yes, that would, if we were giving a point system rating, that would up my points for the game. It
would kind of balance things because we're all on kind of the same playing field.
However, when you talk again about the lack or the sameness in some of those mini games, and the fact that some of the games just weren't fun, even without the AI beating you for no particular reason, even if that didn't happen, the games still weren't fun.
Right.
And there's something to be said for some of the games that were fun, because there were, like I said, there were a handful of games that I enjoyed, but the disparity of good games to bad games, even though there was, a ton of them, means that by and large I just wasn't enjoying myself. And unless they focused on some of the better games in particular, I don't see that this game would give me that satisfaction. Or I guess the option therefore would be if you can kind of pre-schedule your game list, or like pick from a random selection so you can filter down to the games you do like, then there might be some more there. It didn't look like those options were available. you could just play a mini game, but then it doesn't have the tournament competition feel to it that we got from the version that we played.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess it is pretty telling that they just kind of slapped that, like, just pick the game that you like to play
Right.
at the end as a separate mode. But I guess there is a second Fusion Frenzy.
Is there? I didn't know
It
that.
came out for the Xbox 360.
Huh.
So maybe they perfected the formula.
Yeah, I assume that two things. Either because it's a launch title, they're showing off the system, and Microsoft is just a loss leader. They're like, look, we're going to develop for the new platform, and it doesn't matter if this game makes a ton of money or if it sinks, because it's just showing off the hardware. Really, right?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally launch titles, I mean, with a few exceptions, one being Halo, obviously,
Right.
are pretty shallow experiences, right?
Right.
Usually at that point of the life cycle, developers are just kind of learning the hardware, and they're kind of struggling to get something out kind of within that launch
Sure.
period, just so that the system has software to buy.
Right.
And this could have very well been one of those cases. However, the sequel, looking at the reviews, doesn't look too good.
Okay.
And that was released on the 360
Right.
in 2007.
Okay.
But yeah, the scores are like 3 out of 10.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me based on the fact that if they did do it as another launch title and they just put out another thing to kind of pay homage to this launch title that we just played, because it doesn't strike me as a game that had such good reviews or such, people enjoyed it so much that they're like, we have to make a sequel. I don't think that's the reason they made the sequel. That said, there are some clear things that they could do differently in the game that would improve it significantly. And I don't even think that some of those issues have to do with would cost development time. In fact, what I'm saying for this is if you have a list of 100 games and 50% of them just aren't fun, then you'd be better to play just the 50 games and not put development time into the crappy ones. Instead, just release the better stuff and have less of it. And that would be a way to improve the game without costing you anything. It's the same with some of the, whether it's a camera angle or things like that, but there's a few mini games that we played that, due to the control scheme or due to the camera or due to what looked like to be a disadvantage to one of the players based on their starting positions or things like that, that there's some ways that you can improve that just by changing the camera angle or changing the way that the map or whatever is laid out, so that's not an issue anymore. And those things obviously weren't done. And it's hard to say, because this is the kind of game, because it's mini games, they might have only ever done internal playtesting. And they're just like, does this work or is it broken? And that's the extent of their quality assurance. Can you actually finish this without the game breaking? And if so, then ship it. As opposed to, let's get people playing this and get feedback on the mini games and see if people enjoy the games and see if we can improve on the enjoyment of the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think also too, like most mini games, like they always boast how many mini games they have, right?
Right.
So it almost becomes like one of your marketing features, or the bullet point that you put on the back of the box is featuring over 100 games or whatever, right?
Right.
So when little Johnny goes to the video game store and picks up his copy of Fusion Frenzy and looks on the back and it says over 100 games, he thinks, oh wow, like I'm never going to be bored.
Sure, huge value for my money.
Yeah, like this is the perfect game because over 100 games, that sounds awesome, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know, like quality over quantity, I guess, right? Like I haven't played a ton of like mini games. The only one I can really think of is Mario Party. which, Nintendo's just known for kind of handling those type of games really well. Even in their, like, mainline big games, the amount of, like, small little ideas that they kind of inject into like a Mario or a Zelda. I feel like they have enough little ideas that they can create these type of games like no one else really can. I'm trying to think. I don't think anyone out there is really making these type of games.
So one that we played a while ago was this cooking game that was, we had to share cooking duties in this kitchen that was a really wonky kitchen.
Overcooked.
Overcooked, yeah. And then there's another one where, and I haven't played it, but there's one where it's 4-player split screen shooting game, but you can't see your character. All your characters are invisible. So you have to look at other people's screens to see where they are in the map, which used to be screen cheating from back in GoldenEye's days, because you could see where somebody was on the map and throw a grenade in there. But now you have to do it in order to shoot the person, because you can't see anybody on the map itself. So there's interesting ways that people today are taking the casual party game thing and either taking a particular mechanism and just focusing on that entirely, and then throwing a few layers in addition to that are kind of outside of that mechanism. Or there is the Mario style where, and I'm not sure if there's been a recent party Mario game.
I think they just recently announced a new one is coming.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a while since, like, this style where, like, I hear what you're saying about Overcooked, where they're kind of taking that mini game kind of feel, or one of those mini games, but kind of refining it.
Yeah.
But there isn't anyone that's kind of taking, like, lots of ideas, like lots of little individual games, and kind of packaging them up in kind of this format.
Yeah, the format's a big part of it, because I would argue, like you were already alluding to, but the Mario games take very specific mechanisms and then build on those mechanisms in their game, in the normal Mario games, right? So there's elements, whether it's the hat in, what was that Mario with the hat throwing?
Mario Odyssey.
Odyssey, right? And there's these mechanisms that they then, once they've taught you a small part of it, they can extend that mechanism and reach out further and further and further using that same one that you've learned. And then a lot of the levels are designed around using those particular mechanisms in puzzly type fashions. And Nintendo's just generally good at those types of things, focusing on a mechanism first and then building something around that to not only teach you it, but to add more engagement and add more interest to what started as a very simple mechanism. And I think that people could learn from that even in these party type games. But you're right, I'm not sure how many games out there today are focused on many mini games in one package versus focusing on one mini game and extrapolating on that game and polishing that game and making that one mini game bigger and better, to the point where you could argue that there's more of a full game there in and of itself. Now, there's a big difference, in my opinion, of something like, a smaller indie game like we just played, like the Flame in the Flood, where I would say that's still an indie game and it's probably still a small developer, versus something like Overcooked that is also like a small indie game, small developer, but they're trying to do very different things.
For sure.
And one has a narrative feel to it, one has very different mechanisms, but they're still both games that are about one particular concept or mechanism, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the survival mechanism of crafting and putting things together and that resource management, or it's the Overcooked thing of there is some resource management and spatial management in that game. But again, it's pretty solidly like one mechanism or one concept, and then just adding things in addition to kind of fill it out. So I just don't know how much room the party game world has when people aren't playing all on the same couch anymore, though. And I think that's a big, I think that's a big part of it, because Fuzion Frenzy was released for the original Xbox, and other than Nintendo 64, there wasn't another console that supported 4 players, and that was the next one that did. I think you could get some sort of a plug-in for like maybe a PlayStation or something that could support 4 controllers, but very few games were developed for that. And even with Nintendo 64, because it supported it from the get-go, people developed games that could support 4-player or split screen.
Yeah.
And that was the same with the Xbox when it launched, is that was very particularly a design feature of that system.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I don't think the 360 was like that, really. It was more focused on 2-player, if anything.
Or even online play, right? That's when things really kind of took off.
Right. And same with, PlayStation 2, right? PS3, PS4. It's about multiplayer online. It's not necessarily about couch co-op anymore. And I feel that's something that I really enjoyed. That's a big part of my childhood. The fact that you and I did exactly what we're doing today 20 years ago. We sat on the couch together and played video games.
Yeah.
Is a big part of the nostalgia that we get out of playing an old game like this, but also just thinking about the types of games that we're interested in, the things that we enjoy out of video games, the fact that there's a social aspect to it. And I feel like it would be hard to build a big enough market for that today because of that disconnect.
Although in saying that, I feel like Nintendo has kind of really been the only one carrying that flag. Like since, because the GameCube that followed
the
Nintendo 64 actually had 4 ports for controllers.
Okay.
The Wii, which I think everyone knows, that was a huge success in terms of multiplayer stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
casual games, right?
Yeah. To the point where, my parents are asking me to bring a video game console to their house so we can all play Wii Sports, right? That was pretty much unheard of.
Yes.
Up until that point. The Wii U was a bit of a failure in that respect. But even the Switch as a handheld that has removable controllers that you can then share half of the controller with a friend, like anywhere.
Sure.
Kind of speaks to that kind of play together mentality that Nintendo's kind of always had.
Right.
Yeah, they seem to be the only one kind of carrying that flag. Whereas I guess everybody else has kind of either moved online or kind of gone for more kind of single player experiences. I hope that kind of local play never goes away.
Sure, absolutely.
It does seem to be getting more rare as time goes on. I think, back in 2001, even like we were talking about Halo having 4-player split screen, right?
Right.
The amount of hours we wasted on that game.
Sure.
Wasted, yeah. I don't even know if games have 4-player split screen anymore. Like, I think it's pretty rare that games have 2-player split screen now.
Sure. I know that there was a Call of Duty we talked about that you could do split screen 4-player, but I'm not sure if it was the co-op or if it was just the multiplayer competitive mode. I do think that there is a gap in the marketplace for that. And one of the things that we're seeing outside of the video game industry, but in the tabletop industry, is expanding like crazy, because there's people that want to get together with friends and family in person and play games together. And there's a reason that when these games come out on consoles and Nintendo pushes these things, or other consoles and stuff like that, or the Wii, or like motion control, and some of these things are seen as like innovative, or on the other side they're seen as these like what's the word I'm looking for? But kind of like these hooks that, you know, they're asking people to try them out, but they're not really serious. Do you know what I mean? There's a name for that. That's just eluding me right now. But I feel like there's a place for being in the same room together and doing things together that people just stopped caring about when it comes to on the development side. Probably because if you're going to develop a game that requires that, we played A Way Out, right? It requires 2 people to play it.
Yeah.
But if you're going to require more things, you increase the barrier to entry for your game, and therefore you require, or you cut the market smaller.
Right.
But maybe that's not a bad thing if you're the only person in that space.
Yeah, because a game like Fuzion Friendly wouldn't be very fun playing by yourself.
No, it would be that would be a waste of time.
Yeah, even Nidhogg, which we really enjoyed.
That's right. That's right.
I think I said when we were chatting in that episode, I don't think I would ever play it by myself.
Right, versus AI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay that some games have that.
Yeah. It does provide a point of differentiation, and it means that if you're looking for a particular experience, only some games will be able to deliver that. And the fact that we have games in all those spaces right now is a good thing. I think that there is room in the marketplace, and I think there's an audience for games like Fusion Frenzy that we're just not seeing a lot of.
Yeah. So, if you're a developer out there listening, maybe that's a good opportunity for you to kind of innovate in the space beyond kind of what Nintendo's doing. Because I think people still enjoy like getting together.
Yeah.
And being social in real life versus over the internet.
Fist bump, bro.
Yep. But yeah, Fusion Frenzy, it was interesting going back and looking at it. It definitely took me back to that time. I wouldn't spend money on it unless you found it at a flea market for $1.
Yeah, if you actually were able to pick up the original Xbox version of it and be able to play that, then it's probably worth $5.
Yeah, I think you can buy it. You can put the original disc into the new.
I didn't know that.
The Xbox. And I think all it does really is just authenticate the disc and then download a copy.
Interesting.
But if you have Game Pass and you're bored one night and you have a few friends over and you feel like kind of just going back in time, spend 30 minutes playing it.
Sure.
You'll get a few laughs out of it. I wouldn't spend money on it unless you had kind of an attachment to it from the past.
Right. Or, you've got... I could see this working for people younger than us. I could see this working for kids. Just because if you have 2 kids or 3 kids or 4 kids and you can have some fun, there's some competition, it's pretty friendly. A lot of the games we played, there was like you could beat on each other, but not all the mini games were like that. So I think there's a space for that in that environment too. And because the games are short, maybe you wouldn't have some of the issues that we had looking at it from more of a design perspective.
That's interesting. Maybe I'll do a little test with my boys to see if it's something that they enjoy playing.
Make sure that Zach is not the AI and he's on easy.
Yes. Did you have anything else to add, or?
I think I hit everything that I wrote down. But yeah, I guess just the overall design and the visual style, the audio style of the game was just, it was trying to be really cool, and I thought that was just a testament to the time.
Yeah.
It was neon, and everybody was saying awesome things, and everybody had cool accents and cool hair and cool clothes, and it was cool music, and it was just so cool. So
yeah, you kind of got a vibe that you could tell it was a bunch of businessmen in suits, like
right,
sitting around a boardroom table saying, "What are the kids into these days? What's kind of neat?"
Right.
And Fuzion Frenzy was a result of that.
Hashtag feels bad, man.
Yeah. So with that said, check it out if you want a blast from the past.
Indeed.
But yeah, we'll wrap it up for today. Like always, if you're watching this on YouTube, there's an audio version, and vice versa. If you're listening to a podcast, there's a YouTube version. All of that stuff can be found on our website, secondplayerpressstarts.com.
Yeah, and that's second with a 2, number 2, ND, secondplayerpresssstart.com.
And yeah, with that, we'll say goodnight. Good night, Darren.
Good night, James.